So everyone wants an alt season, but it never just starts on hype or a tweet. It starts when dominance starts to drop, and more importantly, when liquidity comes into the market. Today I'm going to go through the obvious triggers of Bitcoin dominance and what it's doing, Ethereum/BTC, and also USD, which is probably the one that people overlook. And obviously, yes, it's September and we've got to look at levels where we could be drawing a line in the sand for certain structure points, but for my opinion, and if you're wondering, I don't think this is the top, by the way, but I know other people do. But let me know in the comments, what is your trigger for the end of this cycle? Are you thinking it's already in, or are you thinking we're gonna not see this Bitcoin dominance change? So just that we're aligned in a simple kind of way, Bitcoin dominance has to make a new lower low. Ethereum/BTC needs to reclaim its level and go even higher, and USDT dominance has to continue going lower and much lower than 5%, hopefully. Let's talk about Bitcoin first, because this is setting the floor. In my viewpoint, and I mentioned it in my previous video, we got to recapture somewhat this area around here, which is around $115,000 to $116,000. That would give us momentum to go even higher. Now, obviously, yes, we're talking about a lot of speculation around Ghost Month, and we're talking about some lunabolics in terms of moon cycles, and obviously the equity market's the slowest and the lowest it will ever be, because September is September, and that's what kind of happens. So yeah, there's a lot of, like, I wouldn't say negativity, but ultimately people are worried. And I don't like that vibe where we're always going off past data. We've got to look at what the charts are telling us. And realistically, what has happened here? And we'll talk about tops and talk about other bits and dynamics and why it's important where we are right now. Bitcoin's quite chill. It's quite all right. And yes, it has corrected about 14-15% from the high, but we are holding this at EMA 21. We are looking on the weekly time frame relatively all right. 3-day time frame, we're kind of stuck in this kind of area, but we do need, as I say, recapture these areas around here above this EMA, and probably around here, as I say, around $116,000, $115,000 to maybe see something a little bit different. But will that give us that dominance kind of surge? I don't know. We need to look into that, because that's kind of the most important factor right now. But I think there's a lot of people that are getting a little bit worried. And let's talk about the bearish scenario as well, because I think if we drop below this area here, I think it's going to get relatively bearish, and we probably will go around that 100K level, which is kind of where we're at the point where it is interesting. But for me, as I said before, I don't think this is a top. I don't think we've had euphoria, so don't get your knickers in a twist. But ultimately, I think a lot of people are very tired and fatigued still regarding what Bitcoin's doing, and more importantly, what altcoins are doing, and more importantly, trading opportunity or making money opportunity, especially in crypto. Some stuff that I am holding is doing all right. Realistically, if you're following my DCA challenge, you'll know that I'm in Solana, and I've been in Solana for a couple of months now. Nothing crazy, though, in terms of returns, but it is actually doing pretty well versus, say, Ethereum right now, as an example, right? But that's the thing, it's very, very cyclical. We are moving from asset to asset, but it's not obvious, and that's where the problem lies. We've got, obviously, hype doing well too over the last few days. As I say, it's just not obvious enough yet. By the way, going back to that DCA challenge, I put full updates on my Patreon. It's fully there. 4 videos, Discord, journals of my own portfolio, and my DCA. I will showcase the DCA on this channel every now and again, but if you want the full information and the plan and the whole situation around it, it's all on there. Now, I'm not going to go too deep regarding the macro stuff, because I think it's still very wishy-washy. We're very, very early in terms of the month. And yes, September is relatively bad, but the macro is the win, the dominant is the sale. Put it that way, right? In one way or another. Because in terms of the seasonal side of where we are with August and September, they are traditionally the worst. They are literally the worst performing S&P percentages. We have policy situations where we need to keep an eye on. We've got CPI coming, we've got other PPI stuff. We have liquidity kind of situations around buy the rumor, sell the news with FOMC and the obvious rate cut that's coming in. That doesn't mean it's going to go mental. It doesn't mean anything. It just means we're going to be probably, I think, in a bit of a lull. But that lull could be really good for the word alt season and rotation, which is what I'm going to explain next. Because if Bitcoin is stable, which is obviously where the ETF volume and all that kind of stuff and the seasonality around that is interesting in terms of money. But if we start seeing Ethereum, and as I just alluded to before, Solana doing all right, and maybe XRP doing a bit of this, that, and the other, BNB going towards its 4-figure number in terms of USD, we might actually see naturally the dominance fall, which is going to be very, very important for getting people back in, because what do people come back for? Green, lovely candles, right? But a word of warning, rate cuts could well spark volatility. Interesting, I know. It's not so much a rate cut number, it's more what Mr. Powell will say that day. Bitcoin dominance is actually looking all right. Personally, at the minute, it is pretty much chilling. It's all right. Now, we can look at a couple of things. Now, let's just look at the overall picture. Let's just keep that on there. Now, there's a couple of content creators out there that believe we're going to go even higher, which I kind of had that thought myself not too long ago. But I do think now this is quite a big drop. If we are to go higher here, just the bearish, horrible, ugly scenario, which is, right, wait for it, Bitcoin pumps, altcoins don't. That's the ugly one, right? Because people are like, well, what am I going to do here? But you get the point. I think the likes of Ben Cohen and a couple of other content creators are expecting us to go even higher. For me, for that to happen, it's got to be pretty horrible. And we've had that before in the past. And I said it on my Patreon on one of the MMQs on Wednesday was, the only scenario I'd accept that is if Bitcoin really goes for it, like properly goes, absolute goals, like 200k plus very, very quickly, and altcoins don't keep up, then the rotation happens, which we've had that before in the previous cycles, as you can see here, where it catches people off, goes boom, over a couple of weeks. Wow, it's like a 2-month period. I don't see that happening personally, but then again, we're all playing speculation and probability here. So what we're waiting for here is the overall situation. Now, that is overall, in my viewpoint, the potential base case of the cycle in terms of rotation, where we're going to go into the 50%. And really good bullish case will be obviously 48 and down. Personal opinion, of course. But it will all lead based off one metric. And the first metric, and you all know this metric, it's obviously Ethereum. What is Ethereum.D doing? Well, Ethereum.D has had a move from 7% to 15% very, very quickly. That is hurtling. But it hasn't really rotated past second base, which is into Solana or XRP or BNB, whatever it may be. So this could be the interesting point of where this can drop and where the opportunity could lie. And this is what we're talking about, the Ethereum transfer. When does it happen? Does Bitcoin need to chill out and relax? What about if Bitcoin starts to move and we start seeing that price formality kind of come in, where the dominance is much higher of Ethereum, the BTC pair of Ethereum is much higher, and Bitcoin starts to motor, it will then equal much, much higher price of USD for Ethereum, obviously. Therefore, people will then rotate back into the market, obviously, right? But realistically, you got to look at the obvious in the room here. This has moved a lot, but it hasn't really corrected yet. So we need to be very, very mindful of that. And we are in September. It's not naturally the best month ever for anything realistically in the financial market. So it's going to be very interesting to see that we already have, in my viewpoint, has an Ethereum transfer. The ETF wealth has been fantastic. Everything's been really good, but it hasn't really got retail in, which could be the problem. But let's talk about the broader picture here, because I mentioned Solana. Solana, in my viewpoint, is my investment that I want to invest in over Ethereum just because I feel there's more multiples here. They're very, very similar in certain ways. In some aspects, they're very different, but obviously, yeah, you can get the argument. With Solana, it's easier to use. It probably supplies more of an Altseason, and it could allow more of the market to run. Now, this is doing really well. As you can see, that's the Ethereum.D. Solana/BTC is also chugging up quite nicely. As I say, I've picked it. I'm in a position. I'm doing relatively well with it. And my viewpoint is I want to be in this because I feel that with meme coin season around the corner, whenever the retail come back, it will probably do all right. We've seen before how manic it can become, and people will breed and grow Solana very, very quickly off buying into random shitty coins. That's just the reality of it. But what we are looking for as well, and this is where it gets hard and people don't like this one, we need to be in this situation where this goes lower. We need to talk about the broader altcoin season, which is firstly existing liquidity or money-making, printing, stable currency printing needs to come back into the market very, very quickly. As you can see there with their yellow circles, that is where we've failed before in the past, and that's where we get these problems. And obviously you've seen my videos before where we've failed. It's crap. It's just the way it is, and this is what needs to happen. We need to see that broad kind of move from second base, which is Ethereum, into Solana, XRP, whatever, and then even lower, lower, lower. Because what we're going to start seeing is others.d, for example. This will need a climb. Look, we're at the buy zone to the lows. We need to break this structure. We need to go much, much higher. Then we will then start to see that rotation map come into play. Thing is, as I say, we are relatively early, and early is good, but ultimately early could also have its pitfalls, because there is one play on the table considerably right now. What if altcoins don't run, and what about if the liquidity doesn't come in and Bitcoin just runs? That's going to hurt everyone. So we need to be very, very mindful. And obviously, yes, you can look at others /BTC with the BTC pairs. Again, still in this buy zone. Well, obviously, profit zone are much, much higher up here. But we need to be very, very mindful of it, because it could go wrong very, very quickly. And the one thing that I will say as well, rotation is earned as well, not just guess. There's too many people guessing right now of like, oh my God, we're just going to go to the moon. Oh, November, December is going to be amazing. It might not be. That's the thing. We are literally speculating right now. And even though the zones are looking relatively good, we could go lower. We could get that correction. We could get a massive, massive situation where it goes terribly wrong. What if Bitcoin goes to 100K? Ooh, are your altcoins going to hold up? Because my personal viewpoint, I probably won't. By the way, if you are interested in trading, this is open to the UK. It's a really good exchange, an amazing welcome bonuses live, and you get 20% back on fees directly into your wallet. So if you are trading, you will get some money back. But on the screen, I've kind of made it a bit easier for you. As I just kind of alluded to it before, that is the most important factor, realistically, because realistically, as I say, they need to all marry up. If that does not happen, we are going to have an issue, a very, very big issue, obviously. So yeah, it feels like a little bit of a crunch time, but the one thing that I will say, and I make it very, very obvious in a lot of my stuff, is we are literally speculating, and more importantly, the macro side of this market is huge, because even when we're looking at stuff like this, what is very, very apparent is obviously how strong these ETF inflows are. Overall, they are probably scaring a lot of people into this market and out of this market too, because the outflows have been pretty aggressive recently, certainly with Ethereum. Obviously with Bitcoin, they've not been as bad, but follow the money. Solana for me is the next best bet for the next ETFs coming along. And then you've probably got XRP and other ones as well, and maybe a little basket of coins. But more importantly, more than anything ever, we are looking at people interested in buying these assets right now. The question is, and the ultimate question is, how high do they need to be in terms of price to bring retail people back, which will give us the hype and the enjoyment again, which I think we are lacking overall in this space, because overall, X is crap nowadays. The views on YouTube videos are all-time lows, comments are all-time lows, everything's just horrible. And I think that's just the way it is right now. It just needs to change. So there we go. Let me know what your trigger is in the comments. It'd be interesting to know what you guys all think. And for me, it's just more the obvious in the room. We need to be patient with this and ultimately get September out of the way and see what happens next. But it might give us some really nice opportunities to invest in the market. Who knows? We'll see. Anyways, if you enjoy, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.